yeah, thanks again for all of you for being here today at the California Water Data Consortium's Data for Lunch series. The recording of today's presentation is going to be available later on our website later this week. But just a bit of background for those of you who might be new to this series or not familiar with the consortium. The California Water Data Consortium is an independent nonprofit organization created by a partnership of state agencies and others to really ensure that we have the best possible water and ecological information in the state. And so we really believe that this helps to ensure that everyone living and working in California can prosper in the face of unprecedented climate challenges. And so part of this work is that we host a Data for Lunch series with the goal of providing a venue to learn more about new and innovative water-related data methods and technologies, share important information on water data topics, and then learn and connect with one another. And so with that in mind, I'm really excited to welcome Julia Lowndes, Devin Burke, and Anna Holder to discuss their work with Openscapes today. They'll provide a bit more background on themselves and the Openscapes project in a moment. But before I hand it over to them, I just wanted to mention that the presentation is going to be about a half an hour or so. We will have time for questions after that. So please feel free to put questions into the Zoom chat, and I'll be collecting those questions for the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Additionally, the presenters have really graciously agreed to stay on Zoom for an informal discussion after 1 p.m. So for any of you that might want to stay on a bit longer to ask additional questions and spend a bit more time with the presenters, please feel free to do so. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Julie and team. Thanks so much to you all for being here today.
Great. Hi, everybody. I will screen share and also just put a link to our slides in the chat. There's a lot of links that you're welcome to click on as we go. But before we get started with the three of us, we're going to just briefly introduce ourselves. So I'm Julia Lowndes, and I lead a program called Openscapes, and that's what we'll talk about here today. My background is that I'm a marine ecologist by training, a California native, and have been slowly and now assuredly sort of moving away from my own research to help other groups get into open science and open data science, because I found it so incredibly transformational for my own research teams. So excited to be here and talk with you all today, and I'll pass it to Devin.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julie. My name is Devin Burke, she, her. I'm a governmental program analyst at California State Water Boards in the Office of Information Management and Analysis. I'm also part of the Water Board's Openscapes instruction team, and I'm really excited to share my personal experiences with you today applying Openscapes to my workflows. I'll pass it to Anna.
Thanks, Devin. I am in the Office of Information Management and Analysis, or OWIMA, as we call ourselves, with Devin at the State Board based in Sacramento. And we brought Openscapes to the water boards because we're really thinking about how we integrate the concepts of open science, kindness, equity, and just like better science for future us. How do we make our jobs easier together? So looking forward to talk about that more with y'all soon.
So I think with Openscapes, one of the main sort of questions that drive us is, what if we connected our skills and our values as a daily practice in our work for those big issues around climate change and social change? So really our vision and approach really is around connecting those big values and motivations with data science, with open science, with mentorship, teamwork, and community building. So how can we really leverage the best available in technology and in social facilitation and teaching practices so that we can all do better together? We're really motivated by this quote from Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson in the book All We Can Save, where the quote is, "To address our climate emergency, we must rapidly, radically reshape society. We need every solution and every solver." So really wondering how we can welcome folks and join this bigger movement towards open and kinder science. So with Openscapes, we're really thinking about how to help shift the culture to help researchers and folks supporting research move from lonely science towards open science as we navigate this big landscape safely with our teams. So that's really what we think of as kinder science for future us. So we really do think about open science as a beautiful landscape with data, people, and tools in the landscape. And there's existing paths forward. And we're really thinking about how to help move folks from sort of sad or lonely science and welcome them as a team so that they can not only navigate this landscape safely, but also contribute to helping others find their paths and building new paths as we need to. So rather than me just starting off by describing what we do, we thought that Devin would show how this experience has emerged at the California Water Boards. So I'll pass it to you, Devin.
Yeah, thanks. I think you have to click like twice to get the rest of the, yep. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Julie, for getting us started thinking about Openscapes. I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about how Openscapes has changed the way I approach my work. And more specifically, I am a contract manager at the California State Water Boards. So to provide some additional context, I work in a small team of 2. It's just myself and another coworker. We manage a collection of 14 contracts totaling about $60 million in state funds. Our contracts support a wide range of chemistry, toxicity, and bioassessment in various rivers, lakes, and streams across California. I really feel like this metaphor of a kitchen helps describe my experience before Openscapes. So I'm going to use this example as we think of applying the Openscapes Champions program. Many of us as individuals or teams might also feel like the characters in the top left image. When we're giving everything our best, we're working in a very disorganized cooking area with smoke and fire coming out of a pot surrounded by a mess of bowls, utensils, and scattered ingredients. Technically, everything we need is in the kitchen, and we have the skills to cook up something delicious, but we're stressed, overwhelmed, and we can't think straight or can't find anything. And asking for help feels like more work, and it's very easy to make mistakes, duplicate work, or overcomplicate what needs to be done. This kind of overwhelm shown in the first image really speaks to how I came into my role. We had all this amazing data and information and ingredients available, but they were scattered in different locations and they could be hard to access or find unless you knew the person to ask. There wasn't really one space to look for finding our vendors, contact information, invoicing data, and as many people do, I managed with what we had and tried my best to organize and document as I went. But with Openscapes, teams, just like professional kitchens, invest time to organize and prep using the Champions program to guide the process so future work can be done easily, more kindly, and in a proverbial kitchen like the image on the right that is intuitive and easy to use so that we can cook up the most delicious open data science products and workflows possible given our capacity and resources. Next slide, please. So I want to get into a little bit more detail on how I've used Openscapes to make contract management workflows more approachable and transparent. As I mentioned in the previous slide, when I first started managing these contracts, it was clear that we had all the necessary ingredients, if you will, but things could be difficult to get to unless you knew the right people to ask or to go to. And I worked on my own to try to get things organized, but it wasn't until I participated as a mentor and was introduced to Openscapes that I really felt like I had the missing piece our team needed. After participating in Openscapes, I had a meeting with my coworker and manager, and we just started diving into our processes and workflows. And I've listed out some of the main ways we've been able to apply Openscapes to contract management, and I'll spend some time discussing each one. I'm going to start with documentation. Oh, it's still the same slide, Julie. It's okay. I'm going to start with documentation. There's a reason I added exclamations. This was such an important step to our process that I inherently knew was important, but really didn't give a lot of time or energy. But naming systems, file hierarchies are so important. And once we started talking in a group about how we save files and where we save them and agreeing to a sole source, it was a whole new world. And now if someone who's not from our office or who has joined our office as a new employee, we can point them to 1 to 2 places instead of 10 different places. Transparent and accessible data falls closely in line with documentation. Once I was able to document and follow an established process, it became much easier and simpler for my own work, and also to guide people down a clear path who are also looking for data, invoicing information, or how to access deliverables. And because we had agreed as a team on how we document information, data could be found in the same place for each contract, even if it was managed by a different team member. And finally, we'll discuss Openscapes as an iterative and ongoing process. And one of the biggest takeaways I've applied is planning for future us. And what that meant for me in the contracting world was thinking about the way we write, construct, and manage contracts, and how we could slowly but intentionally make that easier for us and easier for those who use our contracts. That meant applying project management tools like Trello to help us plan for our contract season each year, and having regular biweekly meetings to discuss what's going well and what improvements we could make, and standing meetings with those who use our contracts and data for check-ins and plannings. Obviously, Openscapes has made a huge impact on my workflow, but I'm not the only one at the water boards has experienced some really cool outcomes. So I'm going to pass it now to Anna Holder, who's going to talk a little bit more detail about how she's applied Openscapes mindset and practices.
Thanks, Devin. Hi, folks. So we're kind of doing things a little bit backwards. Openscapes is a process that Julie's going to talk about, but we really felt it was important that we talk through the outcomes that we've seen and experienced as participants of the Openscapes process. But Devin and I also are leading the Champions program at the water boards, and we can talk about that later too. But when we went through the Openscapes Champions program at the water boards, as participants, we again quickly embraced the need for improved documentation in our surface water ambient monitoring programs. And we wanted to capture all of the little things that are in people's brains, or that some people think we're supposed to know, but it's not easy to find anywhere. Like, where's that hot tip that this is how you fill that form faster, or don't forget to check this box, or whatever. And we decided to flex and build our collective R and Quarto software muscles and GitHub skills to make essentially a website to capture all of these thoughts in a way that makes sense for our teams that exist now and as we grow in the future. It took us about a year to develop after we went through the Openscapes Champions program in 2022. And as Devin mentioned, from the contracting lens, it's an iterative process. We continue to utilize regular meetings that we call seaside chats, also adopted from the Openscapes process, to expand and improve this resource. We have new fellows and interns, and soon extra scientists are filling roles and expanding our programs. And onboarding was a real struggle for us for a little while. As Devin mentioned in her talk, we had to point people to a bunch of different things, and it just felt like it took so long to get folks like with their feet under them. And with this manual and thinking through things, it has significantly decreased the time it takes for us to be able to share what we need with folks as they onboard. And we receive feedback from our fellows that it's actually a really great process now, and it's not so bad. So if you go to the next slide, I wanted to share an example from my own work. I work closely with California tribal governments on a project where we collect and synthesize already open data that is of interest to California tribal environmental departments to make it easier for them to do the amazing work that they do. So this includes water data, but it includes a lot of other things too. We wanted it to make it easier for them to engage with the water boards on topics of interest to them. And central to this is to help build relationships and trust with existing and new partners as we find each other. And so there were two main sticking points with this work. One, our fellows really do the bulk of the heavy lifting on the technical side. And since there was so much turnover within a single year, it was taking me personally a lot of time and bandwidth to, again, get folks up to speed, engage in the actual work, meet with our tribal partners, the good stuff, the things that they came to intern or fellow with us for. And we were using, also the second thing was we were using an internal document that was shared with myself, the fellow, and our tribal partners to track requests and discussions over the past 2 or more years. I think it's getting close to like 4 now, actually. And it got really difficult to find that specific request or that link that was shared 7 meetings ago, right? And keep track of things that we've been receiving requests for multiple times, associated resources, and most importantly, it really didn't enable us to be easily open and transparent with other potential partners about what we were working on and what was planned next. So enter GitHub projects. We all learned about GitHub through Openscapes, and it was a very gentle on-ramp to this pretty beastly software that can be really intimidating for folks. But we used GitHub projects associated with the user manual that's tied to the map, and you can see screenshots of pieces of all of these things here, which was also developed using R and Quarto, similar to the SWAMP manual. And we use GitHub projects so that the products and the requests could be linked. It's basically, you know, the same thing, same. And we use GitHub projects to track requests and display, document, and organize the issues or ideas in a way that looks similar to a project management system folks might be accustomed to using. Devin mentioned Trello, Asana, Microsoft projects. There's tons of them. There's all of them out there, right? And it looked familiar. It was pretty intuitive for folks to use. And the view that you see is the project associated, again, with the user manual, as well as the front end website associated with the repository. And it's linked to a map, an Esri map that the user manual discusses. So the cool thing about GitHub projects is it's free, and the project is open right now, so anyone can see it, but it's secure, so only selected individuals can edit things, but anyone with, I think, a GitHub account could potentially add an issue or a request or request that it be added. And we can consider it and then add it, approve, and then add it to the project board as a to-do item. And we're using this project board to help offboarding and onboarding our fellows as well. So when a new person joins the team, I can send them a link to the user manual that has links to the map, the project board, and the manual itself. 1 link, 3 resources, and then they can jump into the project board and get a sense of what we've already been doing. So the done column, what are we working on now in progress? What's the next priority on our list? So when we've got time or we want to try something new, what are the things that we want to prioritize? And ideas or requests that we've received that still need to be thought through and worked on, that they can start addressing during their fellowship. So that's the request column on the left. And so I often encourage fellows to focus on the in progress as they get started, but when their feet are under them, if they want to flex skills or learn new things, they peek through the request file. There's a long list there. And if there's something that is of interest to you, then bring that over and start working on that through the course of your fellowship. The next slide. So finally, we wanted to share feedback we received from last year's Champions cohort. As I mentioned, we're bringing Openscapes goodness to the water boards. Devin and I and another person, Tina Uris, are kind of leading the charge on this with lots of help. And last year, we had a full cohort at the water boards, and we wanted to highlight the feedback we received to share and elevate their voices and experiences of others who've gone through the program. So the overall feel we've gotten from these responses and others not shown here was that teams reiterated the value of the process for them as individuals and teams, being able to like pause and think about the how. We all have mandates and deadlines and goals that we want to achieve. And it's really easy to just like rush to get to the thing, right? Get to the shiny cool thing. But we skip over the how. And sometimes that can be like really important. It's the most important. And that's where trust can be built or broken. And it can be like the most yummy part of the process where you build team and partnership, or it can be really horrible and painful and be the cause of, not good feelings in the workplace. I think the second response is possibly the most powerful and informative for me. It highlights what we believe to be part of the magic of Openscapes at the water boards, which is that the folks instructing and mentoring, so Devin, myself, and others, are people like those in the teams themselves. And we design the cohort calls and associated activities to center the needs of the water boards community. So it's by people like me, for people like me. Hopefully by now you can begin to see the potential value in applying the concepts, mindsets, and skills from the Openscapes Champions program for you and your teams. And I'll pass it back to Julie to speak more to like what that actually is. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Anna and Devin. And it's so cool. Every time I hear you describe the work at the water boards and what you're learning and what you're doing, it is so phenomenal. I love hearing, Devin, you applying these ideas and works to the contracting world. Like, that is amazing. And thinking about how to work openly with tribal partners and onboard fellows and interns and keep all these projects managed with fewer people asking where things are or how to do things. Like that's so awesome. So love it. So I'll share a bit more now about what Openscapes is and how we work. It's really, we really think about it. We think about Openscapes more of it as an approach. It's not a software platform or anything like that. So the way we describe how we work is through the Openscapes flywheel, and so that's where I'll start as a place to describe this. The flywheel itself is a concept developed by Jim Collins, where transformations occur through continually doing key activities over time that add up into something big. And we applied that that concept to our planning, our execution, our storytelling, and impact tracking through what I'll show you in a moment as our flywheel. And this has really been neat because Erin Robinson, who co-leads a lot of the NASA Openscapes work and broader Openscapes activities, she really codified this through our doing things repeatedly and then going to describe it rather than kind of the other way around of theoretically trying to plan something out and then but we're continually testing and iterating this. And now this flywheel tool is something we really think of it as an open source tool. I reach for the flywheel when I go to plan for something, just as I reach for R if I have some analyses to do, or I reach for Quarto if I have some documentation to write. So hopefully, if this is useful to you too, like, please use it and reuse it. So really what this is, I'm gonna describe this going sort of from the bottom left and around, but really we're thinking about how to amplify open leaders and leverage the good work already being done in specific workplaces and in the broader open science community. So that means leveraging common workflows, tools, skills, and ideas, and using those to inspire other folks to join the way you work, or a specific workshop. Then you can start engaging that future us mindset. And again, that's future us is this idea where we're really thinking about beyond our own computers or our own task list, but how can you work and think and operate in a way that makes it easier for you to onboard a new fellow or intern, or if you're stepping away from a whole project, how can you offboard yourself from that project so that it can continue going? So that future us mindset is something we start engaging first through welcoming folks. We know that tech and new ways to work is intimidating. So how can we use artwork? How can we use, we were talking about pump up music at the beginning of a talk. Like, how can you create welcoming spaces that don't feel as intimidating? And then how do you create space and place for folks to convene? This webinar series is a great example of that. This space that folks know they can join and participate in. And then continuing around to the right of the flywheel, once you have that future us mindset and those sort of that space and place, you can really empower that learning culture. And that's where you're really investing in learning and trust. You're building that psychological safety so that folks are comfortable speaking up if they have a question or if they see a problem, and being comfortable sharing the expertise and that they bring from all different fronts, because everybody has something to bring and learn from each other. And as you build that learning culture, then working openly is something you can do together. So using those skills and tools that you have so that you can document things openly, and then the flywheel spins again. So this is kind of the framework of how we think about how we work, the flywheel. Thought I'd talk specifically about some of the actual things we do too. The Champions program is our flagship program, and this is what Anna and Devin have now been leading annually at the water boards as part of the bigger strategy around open data and equity and inclusion at the water boards. Together with water boards and with us, there's been 130 teams that have participated in the Champions program. So that's 20 different cohorts that we've led throughout the years, and it's already going to be 23 by the end of this spring. This is not your traditional training and workshop. Again, we designed it with that flywheel. So what exists already? What great workshops already exist, and what could we do to fill a gap that we see? So we really designed this for real world experiential learning. Like, how do you develop psychological safety and habits for implementing change together while you're learning? And how do you learn together and be able to articulate where you're feeling stuck? So we have teams that come through this remote program. We usually have seven or so teams in a full cohort, about 40 people. And those teams have opted in to join, and they, through the program, they're able to then start, they don't necessarily come with a problem immediately, but things emerge by learning and hearing from others, especially when these teams are, have all opted in together with really interesting composition and composure. But we'll have teams that are a full research lab with a PI, principal investigator and students. We'll have professional teams that are admin and IT staff and managers together. And by even hearing the same things in the same cohort, they're able to identify places that they're stuck and then make progress towards fixing them. And so they really work on what's important to them, and are able to help identify it through this program. We focus on open data science, and we do have cohort call topics around GitHub, around data strategies, around coding strategies, but there's no skills required to participate. Everything is discussion based, and then the only hands-on activity we lead is a GitHub clinic where, like Anna said, it's a gentle on ramp where we don't expect any prior experience with this tool, but we practice it together to see what's possible. So the Champions program is one of our main initiatives. At this point, we've been thinking about how to welcome other folks into open data science. So we have a few different shapes and sizes of our programs. The Reflections program is a much more lightweight version of the Champions program that's really designed to take that first step about reflecting on your workflows and being able to articulate what's working and what's not working, and setting some goals for yourself personally or for your team. So that's one of the things that we've been we're leading our second year this May. Basically trying to meet the need of folks that were interested in the Champions program, but it's a bit of a bigger lift to get those teams together. The Pathways program is also meeting a need for Black environmental and marine scientists. This is led by Ileana Fenwick in partnership with Black in marine science and Black women in ecology, evolution, and marine science, and really identifying the need of welcoming more Black folks specifically into open science. So this is a remote event series that they've now led for the second time to welcome folks into what open data science is and connect them to other folks in the community. The Mentors framework is something that I'll spend a little bit more time on in a moment, thinking about how these individual champions cohorts could actually be applied across a whole organization in order to help break down silos and help folks collaborate with new technology in new ways. And throughout all of this, open documentation is really an initiative in itself. But in addition to all of these mentorship programs that we lead, you're not limited to learning or participating or using any of these things in terms of our time. Like, everything is available for you to learn and reuse as well. And that's really an important foundation of everything we do. So what do we do and teach in all of these different workshops? It's really about this growth mindset and thinking about concepts and tools that help you reimagine workflows. Anna and Devin mentioned Quarto and GitHub as ways to write documentation and share project management and publish things publicly. And those are displayed here as well. This thing at the top left is this idea around data analysis that really changed everything for me as a scientist. It was the idea that no matter what your research question is, no matter where your study system is, if you're working with data, you'll follow these steps. You'll need to import it into your computer in some sort of software analysis of some kind. And then if you take the time to tidy that data, then you'll be able to reuse tools and concepts in order to understand it and actually do your science. And so for me, this totally changed my world, that the idea that reformatting dates was not part of the scientific understanding. And if I could separate that sort of messy data wrangling from the science, then I could be unstoppable with the sort of things I could do with my science. So these are the sort of concepts we talk about in the Champions program. And then another big part of this is that there's a growth mindset around mentorship as a skill that we can develop. So teaching, giving and receiving feedback, being generous and not assuming what people know, listening and not solutioneering, reflecting and learning, these are all as important as the coding and data skills that we discuss in the Champions program. And so we're constantly trying to learn and point folks to other communities that are doing this type of work as well. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the NASA Openscapes framework, since this really grew from one of the Champions programs, where what we've done with my collaborator, Aaron Robinson, is we've been developing a mentor community across the NASA Earth Science data centers. So we started this 3 years ago, and the idea was that there's 12 data centers around the United States that manage the satellite data that NASA collects about our Earth, and people use these data for climate change research and many, many other things. I know it's used a lot in water as well. And as NASA is migrating all of these data holdings to the cloud in Amazon Web Services, These data centers needed a common approach to teach users and researchers how to access this data and migrate their own workflows to the cloud as well. So we use the same cohort-based approach for teams to help build this community so that they could build trust, identify what was common, and start building tutorials that they could teach together so that that sort of shared investment could be reused. And they've developed this incredible community of practice for teaching, for mentoring, facilitation. They're also, through teaching early, they're finding barriers that then they can solve through software or through further conceptual design that I'll show you in a moment. But these folks are just absolutely amazing, and they're like Anna and Devin, like at their organization, seeing places that where they can contribute and really building a whole community around it. So I think this is one of those NASA mentors, Cassie Nichols, who says that we've created this collaborative environment for NASA data center staff to collectively support open science initiatives for NASA Earth data users. We've developed awesome materials to help those users, but just as important as what we've done are the mindsets we've grown along the way. For example, it's okay to share imperfect work in progress with each other, and that makes them better at dreaming and implementing the future together. So these are some of those, like the things that you'll see that's a result from all of this work that the NASA Openscapes mentors have done. They manage a Jupyter hub where folks are able to code in Python, R, and MATLAB, and we're really working on that kind of base image being usable for people who want to try it in code spaces and other places in the cloud, so they're not limited to our learning space. They've created this open resource called the Earth Data Cloud Cookbook, where all of the learning events and tutorials and lessons learned are in that space for people to come back to. They've also been developing a Python library to make Earth access easier, and created these cheat sheets and guides so that you have a conceptual understanding. And we iterate and teach these in many different workshops and different audiences and sort of fine tune them as we go. Onboarding has been a big theme through Anna and Devin's conversation, and then also for us as well. We approached this for the NASA mentors kind of in a modular way, kind of borrowing the way we think about code, like write it in one place and be able to use it in other places and cross-reference it. So we have these 3 different places for the NASA mentors where we think about onboarding. Is it onboarding new NASA leadership so that their staff participate in this community? Is it for the mentors themselves once they've joined and they need to know what tech to use and how to get accounts for things? Or is it for our team when we're thinking about how to have checklists and timelines in order to manage the community? And all of this work is really important, and have these different audiences, and how can folks reuse and find these things as they level up in the responsibilities they have. We've seen open project management already through GitHub that Anna showed, and this is just one other view that we've learned about recently that we're experimenting with. There's a calendar ability that you can attach starting dates to your GitHub issues and then try to have a shared calendar before, because honestly, calendaring across open communities is really hard. We have different tech, things don't show up as recurring, and people don't get alerts, and things get deleted and not updated. So we're experimenting using GitHub as a place that people can learn when things are happening. So yeah, I think just, we're mentioned some of these communities.
Looks like, is Julie frozen for other people? Or
Yeah,
is it-
I was thinking.
Oh, you're back.
Hey, Julie.
Hi.
You froze
Sorry,
at the
everybody.
start of the slide.
Cool. I'm back now. Thanks.
You're here.
Awesome. I was just going to say, we've been working with all of these groups like the water boards and NASA and the Pathways to Open Science, also NOAA Fisheries, and also trying to create ways that these groups can talk to each other as well and learn from across government. And so that's been a really awesome part of this work too, is the learning beyond organizations that we get to do together. So I just have a few more slides. Sorry, I gotta get all excited and talk more.
It was great. Anyway. No, don't worry.
But yeah, so thinking about like how to implement change, like change is really hard, right? And people are feeling stuck in different ways, but this has been a really it's been great to see how folks feel change across individuals, teams, and organizations, you know, whether it's learning a new package in R and telling a colleague, or feeling a bit braver to speak up in meetings. It's about changing the ways team operates. You know, we have some teams that say like, oh, you know, we met twice a year before. I didn't really feel like I was on a team, but now I check in with my colleagues on Slack and just feel more connected, even though, you know, we're all hybrid. And seeing parts about your workflows, like that you get 90 emails that you need to curate. Oh, like what is another little, what's something else we could do here? And really thinking about these like organizational change. You know, this is big and you know, happening on all different levels, but it's been really amazing to see real progress around open science at NASA and NOAA and California Water Boards, and also that cross-governmental sharing. And to that point, really think about like what's possible because of all this. So, you know, the point isn't to use GitHub. The point is to have more time on science and solutions, and have, you know, better, robust products, less things lost day to day, improve morale within staff so that there's less turnover, less loneliness, and real institutional change. And also, you know, just really focusing on those big picture goals and connecting our daily work around, you know, around water and around climate to those bigger actions. So this image is from a paper that this cross Openscapes community has written to share some of our advice around how to build community. So with that, I'll just say thanks. It's great to be here and really looking forward to the discussion and to thinking more with you all. Thanks so much.
This was awesome. Thank you so much to all three of you for being here and chatting with us. I'll open it up for the Q&A now. If anyone has questions, please feel free to type them in the chat or come off mute, raise your hand, whatever you feel most comfortable with. We have a bit of time, but maybe I'll kick us off with kind of a basic question of how do I determine if Openscapes is suitable for my team or my work?
We get this question all of the time. And the short answer is, if you work with people on a thing, then you're ready. Like that's it. It's not a high bar. But we have more guidance that I'll add to the chat. It's really, I think for us, when we encourage folks to apply, there's sometimes this fear as like, oh, open science is involved. I have to be a data expert or know all the codey bits. And it's like, no, because if we think about the data life cycle or the cycles of our workflows, we need people in all different parts of our organizations with all different skill sets. And in our office, in OWEMA at the water boards, we believe everyone works with data, whether they know it or not. And so what's critical is folks work together on a thing and they're open to being brave and talking about their mindsets and workflows and learning new things. Devin and Julie, what else did you want to add?
I don't have anything else specific to add other than, yeah, the participation aspect is so important. We echo that a lot when we're talking about Openscapes at the water boards. It's not something that you can attend and kind of sit back. We really ask that people who join and kind of have teams join are ready to be a little uncomfortable and put themselves out there. And that's kind of where we build that trust and transparency. And that, as Julie has mentioned, is just as important as the open data work is the actual way that we work together and approach work together.
Totally. It sounds like this is a great follow-up question. We have in the chat, what are the benefits of people who don't necessarily work with data very frequently going through Openscapes with team members who that might be their whole job, is to digest and work with data?
Yeah, I'd say that that's one of the coolest parts of this, is when those folks are in the same room together or in the same team together, like somebody who thinks they don't work with data every day and somebody who does. I think a lot of us work with like spreadsheets often and managing emails and all of that, and that is data. So like thinking about how workflows can apply to data of different kinds is one interesting thing. But I also think the documentation and the workflow and the team communications part of this is so important, whether you work with data or not. And that actually becomes a big part of this. Like I've been in small meetings in some of those seaside chats that Anna mentioned, with a person who didn't work with data and had been sort of sitting back in a lot of the meetings. And when we started screen sharing with Quarto how to write documentation, cooperatively with her team, like she like leaned forward in her chair and was like, this is what I need in my and it was, it's those moments. It's like, that's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, that's great to hear.
And I think too, one of the things that we found is people get interested in Openscapes because they think they're going to work on a data project, whatever that means. And then they join and we talk about concepts and mindsets and the pathway. And it's like, oh, before we do the thing, we need to think about all the stuff, the not sexy things that have to happen in order to have a really good product, right?
Yeah.
And that requires documentation or knowing where all the things are, or everyone putting the things in the same place, right? And so spending time to think about that and learn how we work the same and differently, find the common, as Julie said. We also, in our cohorts, we talk about reusing and remixing, or slowing down. So you slow down and pause to think about what you need to think about, so that later you can speed up. All of that is more important. And so in the water boards cohorts thus far, it's been less about doing the data analysis or building the cool shiny thing, and more about like the how are we working, what's working well for us, celebrating the things that we already are like really good at, but then being like, oh yeah, but over there in the under the carpet behind the door, like you should probably think about that too.
That dusty corner.
That everyone's afraid to touch.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really love this next question that we have in the chat, because I think it is a really big hurdle for a lot of folks. Is, do you have any special tools or tips about overcoming organizational fears related to sharing data? So what if this data goes to someone who's going to sue us? What if it's misused? What if it's misunderstood? How do you kind of tackle that set of questions?
Yeah, it is a great question. And I think it's kind of aligned with what we're talking about here already, because there's a lot of ways to be open and to work as a team, even if your data can't be public. Like this isn't about making all your data public immediately. This is about how, like, one example is with NOAA Fisheries, there's often code that can be shared with that won't run without the data, but at least people can reuse that code with the data that they can't share either. So I think that there's some good examples from there, but I'm curious, Anna and Devin, if you had other things to share.
Yeah, I would share that open data can be open in different ways, as Julia's touched on. And so just starting to be open about your data with internal staff can be a great first step. You know, there's some of my contracting information and data that is not public, but it needs to be accessible to the people that use the contract, who need to access like information and details about invoicing and those types of processes. Need to be accessible internally for folks. And that still in my mind is open data. I'm making it open to the people who need to use it. And then there is also the scope of open data for external partners. So outside of maybe my team and then outside of the state, which is a little bit different, but I think talks or excuse me, speaks to the need of documentation. You know, we talk about using GitHub for project management. GitHub can also be used to document code and parse out and explain what your process was so that people can use and go through your code and apply it clearly. Instead of just grabbing it and going, you can actually, you know, do an R markdown or something of that nature and describe exactly what the code is meant to be used for. And I think that can help kind of abate some of the fears of, you know, is this going to be used incorrectly? And that can still happen, but documentation, I think, is really key when we're thinking about like sharing our data and processes and data flows in an open mindset.
Yeah, I mean, plus one to everything Devin and Julie just said, but I also wanted to highlight too that folks in this community are probably familiar with AB 1755, the Open and Transparent Water Data Act. So as governments, it is our responsibility and our obligation to make Californians' data accessible to Californians securely, right? Open doesn't always mean public, but I also wanted to flag and kind of like re-highlight things that both Devin and Julie just said. We're not just talking about the flat files with the numbers in it. We're thinking about the whole cycle of how we work, from documentation of the process, right? Like the workbooks that Julie shared, to the code, to all the packages that you use, like all of it should be open in a way that's appropriate. And that's where we're striving. It's a big lift. Like, we've had conversations about metadata in this community, right? Like, there's a lot of things that we need to kind of like rumble through together as a collective community to figure out what's appropriate and how much do we share and what makes sense and how do we make it usable and useful to folks. But we need to keep rumbling and get there because it's our responsibility. That's my personal
No, I
opinion.
love that answer, Anna. And I think to your point, like, double exclamation point, the name of the game is documentation, because then you can articulate why this needs to be held back or kept internal, or why this is open in the more public sense, or, you know, this is the code file and we keep it here. But documenting all of those differences helps to make it an open system, it, you know, even if you're keeping things internal. So I think that's,
and I think too, combining that with the building the partnerships and the trust, we've had experiences where I'm like walking through the GitHub project with our tribal partners and I'm like, oh yeah, we got stuck on this part because we couldn't find this thing. And because it's open and they can click in it, they're like, oh, you didn't, here's the thing right here, just beep, bop, boop, and there's the answer, no problem. If we wouldn't have made it open and transparent, then it would have been much more difficult for our partner to give us the solution, to co-create solutions together. But that requires open software, documentation, relationship, and trust.
love the heart. Really great question from Nick also in the chat. Can you guys talk a little bit more about the importance of fostering kind data or developing kind data, and then building that kindness as sort of a core element to team building or effective team building?
Yeah, I mean, I think they go together. I think so. We try to both role model what kind meetings can feel like, what open documentation and can feel like in a meeting, so that there's multiple channels to participate. You know, if somebody drops out, like, are the slides there and folks can present in my stead? You know, that kind of thing, like role modeling open.
Yeah.
But then we also explicitly talk about it too. We have, I mentioned the data strategies and GitHub lessons, but we have a lesson on psychological safety also. And we talk about growth mindset before we get our hands on the keyboard for GitHub. Yeah, and I think, some of the artwork that
I
you've
love
seen
the
with
artwork. Yeah.
yeah, though that is open science.
Yeah.
A lot of the artwork, from the monsters in the kitchen to the landscape, were created by Allison Horst, who's a open science community member, and you can reuse those for anything you want. And I think that helps teach data strategies in a kind way. Yeah.
I think I've been trying. Devin, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to mention one of the things that has been most impactful for me is like feeling comfortable messing up, feeling comfortable taking risks in a space that, I had to work hard at making that feel comfortable, and that's not to say that that space wasn't comfortable, but I think a lot of people come into meetings or, they're new employees or, they're working with new people and, they feel like I have to be perfect at this. And when you start being vulnerable with other people, they also start feeling comfortable being vulnerable around you. And that has really helped me bring kind of like what Julia is talking about is like, set an example for how we would like, these meetings and spaces to be run. And it's surprising when you open yourself up to taking risks in your work and, kind of going into like, this might sound like a crazy idea, but I'm going to throw it out there. Like a lot of other people might be feeling that way or no one is. And then you talk about it and why you had that thought, and it can translate into a lot of really cool projects and workflows. And I think that's been a really big piece of Openscapes for me when I think about like kindness in the workplace and kindness in our work.
That's
I
great.
think too, to add to that, particularly knowing that this group is probably like heavy data users, you want to get in the weeds and see the stuff and write the code, right? Thinking and reminding ourselves that the data that we're looking at is attached to, connected with, important to humans is like, even if it's about water quality, right? Like we've got this temperature in the water, right? Like that is connected with ecosystems and the way people live, work, and play in our environment. And sometimes we forget that when we're just looking at the numbers in the code. And so that for me means, what kind of data am I asking for? Is it important for me to ask for that from this community? How am I going to use it when I get it? And really thinking about these fair and care principles of not just making data open and accessible, but then making it useful and used to the communities and people that it'll impact. And I think there's a lot of barriers to that, and there's a lot of difficulty to that, and it takes more time and intention. But that's, I think, the core for me of how we make the data more kind. And sometimes making a kind decision is, even though I really want this data about this community, it would not be fair for me to ask of it. And so I'm not going to use it, and I'm going to think about something else and get the answer in a different way, which might take longer for me and it might make my life more difficult, but it's more equitable and kind to the community that's impacted.
I love that as a kind of the formal endpoint to this, and really just remembering that why we're asking these questions and why we're looking for answers is because of the human impact that changes have, or environmental changes have. So like, that's just kind of the name of the game of what we're seeking. And so keeping the human element, I think, is really critical. We are transitioning to the more informal Q&A. Our presenters have agreed to stay on if you guys have more questions, but wanted to flag that our next data for lunch is April 16th with Cal Matters, if you wanted to tune into that. But please subscribe to our listserv if you would like to see a recording of this presentation. We'll post it there. I did see some more questions in the chat, so I'm happy to keep running through these with all of you. Cami R asked such a good question about distinguishing between needed business processes and changes there, and then implementing software and tools. And how do you kind of distinguish between those two things?
Yeah, I'm happy to share a story. I think they go together, both in terms of software tools and needing business process, but also the common starting point is talking about it and getting the folks in the room. So the example that comes to my mind immediately is at NOAA Fisheries, they have 6 science centers around the US, and several regional offices and the Office of Science and Technology. So there's maybe 10 or so offices around the country, and whether or not those offices could use GitHub was varied based on interpretations of policy decisions and who was at the centers to advocate for it or support it. And so I think it was interesting to have those teams join and have a common place to, first of all, talk about who and who couldn't use GitHub. And they ended up creating a GitHub governance team that was cross centers, that had a voice higher up the NOAA policy world, and advocate for GitHub so that folks could use it in a similar way. And so that's an ongoing sort of business process and implementing software tools story that I think is really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna add, I think it's I do this too. Like I'm in a problem and I just want to find a quick solution. So I think that a new tool will be the answer. And often it's like, no, you got to talk about it. And maybe someone is using the tools that we already have at our disposal in a different way or with a different lens that can actually solve my problem faster. That's not to say that we need modernized open source tools in government. Like we definitely need those too. But sometimes, right, it's like, oh, I don't need to learn like Python in a day to solve a thing. Instead, I need to look at the documentation or know how to Google a thing, like, right? So it's not always about one or the other. It's a both and maybe also something else.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that's so true, where it's like sometimes it feels easier to invent a new tool specific to the questions that you're asking yourself. But then when you think about it a little bit differently, you realize it might be answered in some very, very straightforward way with the tool that has existed for years and you've never, anyway, I like that a lot.
And I mean, also too, like just linking to the California Water Data Consortium, sometimes we're thinking of a new tool as a Band-Aid when the real issue is data infrastructure and systems.
Totally.
And we need to spend the time to correct and improve and strengthen and make more transparent our core infrastructures so that the tools that we have can be easier to use.
Well, and frankly, just not proliferating tools to which I think almost creates less of an open scape for data. Like, I totally agree. I'm curious, Anna, so how has your improved contract management workflow or documentation influenced other teams at the state or at water boards? Because I feel like that would be such like an awesome new tool set to have, but how do you bring other people into kind of your workflow now?
Devin's the contract. We're like almost the same person, but we're not. So I'm gonna let Devin answer the contract question.
It's kind of like showing, not telling is the easiest way I can describe. I work with a lot of scientists whose job is to focus on these huge and important problems outside of contracting. And the contracting is a mechanism and a tool for them to apply the science. And so, when we first kind of developed these kind of tools and workflows and access to data, honestly, no one used it, because they were used to kind of figuring it out as they go or on their own. And it wasn't until we really started, like, I hold quarterly meetings with the people who participate in our contracts. We have multiple roundtables that we'll present at, and just reintroducing data to people in a way that reminding them that we've made it accessible for them. They don't have to fight the data anymore. You know, it's here, it's in one space, and I get emails all the time about like, I can't find this document, I don't know where to go. And now, instead of like having to like wrangle it myself, I can just point them. Here's the link, it's all here. And so it's kind of like showing them the process. And we've worked, I would say that state work is kind of interesting in contracting land, because I'm a contract manager, but I work with other offices that also have contract managers for different purposes. And collaborating with them has been great. We can't always influence each other's work, but we can share. And so I think showing, not telling has been the most successful way to kind of introduce people into these things that we've tried to create for them, and asking for feedback. I mean, I always tell people, like, if what I'm creating isn't helpful for you, then it's not helpful for me. So being open to feedback, and if I'm missing something, like letting people and giving them the opportunity to give me feedback has been huge too.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the group. Does anyone else have any lingering questions before we round out the presentation? Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. This was awesome. I feel like I could talk to you all day long about all these things. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, but if you all, the attendees, have any lingering questions for the Openscapes team, please feel free to shoot us or an email, or the Openscapes team an email, and I'm sure that we can get your question answered. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining today. See you all soon.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.